Okay, I want to talk about the formations of government. We're going to learn later about systems of government, like democracies and monarchies and oligarchies or dictatorships. But what I want to talk about now are formations of government, literally the shape the government takes. This is mostly just the logistics of it. And it tends to talk about or deal with how central or national governments, for instance, our central national government would be our federal government in Washington, D.C., how they react with or control local or regional governments. We call local governments, city or county, or regional governments we might call states. Other countries call them different things. But how those different levels of government, national, central, or regional or local, how they communicate with and respond to each other makes up a formation of government. The most common type is what's called a unitary government. Okay, a unitary government right here. This has a alright, that's a useless marker. That has a really strong central government, where the national, federal, or the central government is really strong and has most of the power. And this regional or local governments have very little power. In fact, in some countries, the federal government actually appoints regional or local governments and can get rid of them at any time. A lot of countries have this, especially smaller countries. We're a huge country. America's gigantic. In small countries that have a similar culture, have a small border, that have a similar religion or language, unitary governments kind of make sense because you don't have that much area to actually control, so you can have one centralized government and they can have small governments sort of around the country that can sort of help them with policy or help them with what they need to get done. The next one you have is a federal government. This is actually what the United States has. This is where the federal government and the state and regional, and local governments actually work together. So Washington, D.C. works with Frankfurt, who works with Lawrenceburg. Governor Beshear or President Obama cannot fire whoever the mayor of Lawrenceburg ever ends up being, right? So whoever the Lawrenceburg mayor is cannot be fired by a higher government because they work together. So you have, for instance, you have national law enforcement, what you might call the FBI. You have state or State Bureau of Investigation, you have state cops, and you have local cops. And each one of them work together, right? This is how the federal government works. National, state, and local actually work together to solve problems, to help people, to do the functioning of government. Whereas in a unitary government, it is one centralized government, the national capital, the federal government has the power, and the smaller governments have much less actual power. Then, the last one you have is a confederation. Confederation is very rare. A confederation is a government where actually the regional governments are very strong, and the national government is actually very weak. Really, Switzerland is our only example of this. They've been a confederation since like the 13th century, but it makes sense if you look at them actually. If you can find a marker over there for me, because Switzerland has a lot of different cultures, and those cultures have different languages. Thank you. They have different religions, and so let's say this is Switzerland right here. Okay, it's not really a square, but let's say it's a square. All right. Switzerland has the Alps in it, and the Alps have different areas. So there's literally an Italian section where they speak Italian here. They have Italian customs, and they have Italian. They're more Catholic, right? And then you actually have a French section over here, right, where they speak French, and they have more French customs and French religious customs, and they have more to do with actually France than they might with the Italian side of Switzerland. Over here you have more Belgian. You also have what's called Belgian Swiss or German Swiss, and then you have the German section. So what they do is each regional government decides, what schools are like, and they deal with roads.
Molly Grove. Please call extension.
And they deal with all the things our government does. Each regional government actually controls that. They have a national government, but it's very weak. It's there for defensive purposes. It's there for, they have a similar currency and make some national decisions. The everyday real decisions are being made by the regional governments. In America, since we're so big, right, so here's our gigantic country here, right, so we have D.C., well, that's not where we have D.C., we have D.C. over here, right, but we have all these states. We have lots of different customs, we have a lot of different religions, we have lots of different kind of people, we're spread out, so the state and regional, or the state and local governments can actually be respondent to the people if once the D.C. is far away. So the federal government is in your life, but so is the state and local. Whereas a unitary government, let's say it's a smaller country, and here's a capital, maybe you only have 15 or 20 or 30 million people, which isn't that many people for one country. And so the federal government can be more respondent since it doesn't have as many people or cultures or religions to have to deal with. So when we learn about systems of government, like dictatorships or democracies or whatever, a democracy is a good example. We're going to talk about a democracy, right, where the people actually control the government, the will of the people. But you can have a democracy here, because Switzerland's a democracy. You certainly can have a democracy in America because we're a democracy, and you can have a democracy in a unitary government. For instance, England is a unitary government. It's a constitutional monarchy, but it's essentially a democracy, and they have a small unitary government. So democracy can work with any kind of formation, but it's important to know how the formation of the government works, because that's going to decide how the democracy is going to work, right? So we'll have practice on this so you can learn and to go over this, but if you have any questions, this is the formations of the government, right? This is how the governments are literally, logistically, how they relate to each other. You have strong central and weak regional. You have regional and national and central that share responsibilities. And then you have a weak central government and strong regional government. So strong regional, weak central, right? So these are the formations of government that we're going to discuss. And if you've missed class, obviously you can look over this a couple times.